All right, we're good.
Thanks. Okay, so I have a talk. Let's see how long it is. I woke up at 5 a.m. to make these slides because I didn't want to do them last night. So I'm Mike. I've already introduced myself. I'm the lead of the web compatibility team. I used to be at Opera, and I worked on similar broken web things. So that's me. You've already met some of the team. We're a little bit bigger. We've also got Carl Dubast out of Tokyo. We've got Ola in Berlin, Eric in Taipei, and then we've got some interns and contributors. And then, of course, there's like all the Mozilla platform engineers who care about compat, interop, and the web. And so it's not just us working on stuff. So Rick asked me to try to motivate people to care. And I'm going to do this in the worst way possible, right? So I've told this story before in talks, trying to get people to understand, like, why should I, as a developer, as a person, care about the web, and that it should work for everyone? And so, like, this analogy, which makes a lot of sense at 5 a.m., is so, like, you think of something that's really good and you love and you want to share with everyone, which naturally everyone just thought of orange juice, right?
Yeah.
So, like, everyone deserves to have orange juice. I think that's like an uncontroversial opinion, right? Yeah, everyone's nodding. Like, even like weird little kids deserve orange juice. And you know, if we're turning this into browsers, I don't know. You're probably all thinking of, like, who's the weird kid of the browser world, right? But this is like the web, right? Like, the web is so important because of what it represents, right? We all have access to information, to communication. Like, I think we're all in this room because we believe that, right? It doesn't matter who you work for. Like, the web platform is powerful, like being able to share hyperlinks. And so that's kind of like web juice. Everyone should have access to the web. It doesn't matter what device you're using, what browser you're using. Like, the promise of the web is that doesn't matter. Reality is a little bit different. I really like this picture. You don't need to speak Spanish to. So sometimes there's, like, different experiences on the web for good reasons, weird reasons, bad reasons. Same path to the university, different experience depending on, I don't know. So we have this Mozilla manifesto. I don't know if everyone's read it, but there's a few bullet points in there that specifically kind of call out what I think to be our mission as part of this compat interop effort. The internet's a global public resource that must remain open and accessible. Individuals must have the ability to shape the internet and their own experiences on it. And the internet is only effective if it's interoperable, right, and decentralized. So to me, that means it's my job to worry about, yeah, a website doesn't work in Firefox, but if the website also doesn't work in Chrome, that's important to me. If it doesn't work in Edge, like, I want to fix that problem or help with that problem to the extent that I can, right? We all have deadlines and OKRs and et cetera, bills to pay. But the internet should work for everyone. Think about the web juice and then immediately forget you ever heard about web juice. So I wanted to just mention a little bit, like, how we work, like what's the data we're working with, like how we see things that are busted. And slightly historical story. So our team, the WebCompat team at Mozilla, was formed in 2013, and that was when you know, everyone in this room, you were all using Firefox OS. You remember that? Like, that was all our primary phone. No, just me. I've never actually used it, but so we had this phone, right? We were gonna, like, break into the market, and it turns out it's really hard to ship a mobile browser. Because there's all this legacy content, and all these websites assume certain UA stream patterns, assume certain platform capabilities, assume, like, show them this banner and they click on it and it goes to the App Store and you install your APK, right? Like, that doesn't always hold true. So they put together a team to, like, go ask websites, like, hey, could you stop sending us the desktop site, right? And part of that is as a result of decisions that Mozilla made, which I think were not the right decisions, but whatever. Firefox OS is dead. We did a lot of like mobile library auditing, you know, it's like looking at what are the popular libs that people use, like Sencha Touch, like how does that work with our implementation? And the answer is not very well. We did a lot of UA detection library testing and outreach. So I have this, let's see if this link works. Yeah, I made this web page a few years ago. It's totally, don't ever look at it. It's just kind of, you know, we're like, okay, these are all these really popular libraries. Let's test them. If there's bugs, let's get them fixed. A lot of this work, which is just like, it's not very fun. It's not very satisfying, but it was important work, and it made some differences. Eventually, we moved on to really care about Firefox for Android, and then Firefox desktop. People, I don't know, I know we're being recorded, and maybe people won't like to hear this story who I work with, but when I interviewed at Mozilla, I was working at Opera, and specifically this job was about mobile web browsers, and the last my manager said, like, any questions? You know, I said, what do you guys do for desktop compatibility? And he kind of laughed and said, we have market share, right? And so 4 years later, things are looking great. So we really care about desktop, right? It's I would say one of our main focuses today. Anyways, going back to the UA sniffing stuff, like 99% of all our bugs, you know, we did all this work to ask websites like, hey, we have this weird UA string format. And then eventually, like, I just got sick of doing that. And so you write a little bit of C++, and it's like, let's match the behavior of what everybody else does, which is like, we decided we weren't going to include the Android version token because that's like a privacy fingerprinting concern, which, yes, no, also breaks like every single mobile web page if you don't have it. And so this was kind of like really our first real taste of like, let's write a little bit of code, and like the code's ugly, right? I mean, all C++ is ugly, but like we're doing a little bit of lying there. Like on line 960, you can see we're like, okay, if you're on like an old Android version, we're gonna lie and pretend you're 4.4. This is not great stuff. I'll remove it one day. Otherwise, add this and it works. And that's you know, these things we're talking about. People make assumptions based on the shape of UA string. It's like, okay, you have this capability, and if you're on 4.3, you don't. Which, like, if you're tied to the Android version, that makes sense. But if you're like shipping your own Gecko, it makes no sense. But
I love how this stuff comes full circle, by the way. You know, like our UA string still has an escape, like Gecko.
Yeah, it all does. So we started around 2014, 2015. We started to do less of the like, let's ask every web page to fix themselves, and obviously that doesn't scale. And our team was like 3 people. Like you can't boil the ocean type thing. And one of the reasons we got a lot more, we realized this was kind of our epiphany moment, was this analysis we did for Asia. And these are some old slides. Jump into my alternate deck from years ago, right? So this is like a famous thing Tantek said in CSS Working Group. In 2012, this was forever ago, and it's like, it's no longer acceptable to have 0 WebKit prefixes. Like people were really pissed off about this. Nothing happened for 5 years, 3, 4 years. Let me skip this, but we had a project where we needed to see like, what does the web look like in Japan, right? This is important for some kind of deal or something. And so we did the research, right? And so here's some market share context from 2015. Things are different today, but you can see in Japan and China, like, there's no Gecko anywhere there. There's no Edge. Like, it's, someone can do the math. Let's just say 99% like Link or WebKit. And so the context for building a mobile website in Japan 2 or 3 years ago is you have an iPhone or you have a Chrome mobile, and you get it working there, and it's awesome, right? Reality is for Gecko users a few years ago was, so you can see this is like Chrome Gecko, right? Left, right. A little bit different. Or I guess I switched the versions. You can tell which one's broken and which one's not broken. Not great. So these are the most popular websites in Japan. And so it turned out, like if you opened your phone and like you would never open that browser again if you saw that, right? You'd be like, what is this garbage? Okay, so you get the gist. How many of these are there? Wow. Okay, so we opened this bug, and this is like, I had to write an email and I had to convince Dee Barron and Boris Barsky and Rock at the time and some other people, like, okay, we can't render 30% of the web in Japan or China, of the top websites. Like, that's a non-starter. We have to bite the bullet and we have to implement these non-standardisms. When in reality, we just had to like shift our thinking. Like, these are the de facto standards. This is what the web looks like. This is the mobile web. And so we invented this compatibility standard idea where it's like, okay, let's just throw these things in the spec, implement them ideally interoperably, reverse engineer where we have to, and that.
You did that only as fallback. Like, you said Talent Talk was trying to convince the CSS working group to care about this? Like, this was a workaround for the CSS working group?
Basically, yeah. They didn't care at the time, and you know, I don't work with them. They're all lovely people. I just don't follow their work. I don't have time to. So I think some of what we did pushed them to move a little bit, right? Which I think if once you start putting WebKit prefix stuff in specs, people get nervous. They're like, okay, let's actually keep working on this thing we promised we were going to work on that never happened. So we, like, the philosophy started to be, let's document what the web looks like, implement the things. Let's just kind of like do like a bankruptcy type thing, and just start to think of these WebKit prefix APIs as APIs with crappy names, but they're just web APIs, right? And some of them are actually really cool, and you can only do things through those APIs that Apple invented and we inherited. So that's also when we started approximately this WebCompat.com project, which the idea there was we want to just like create a honeypot for broken websites. And this is intended to be vendor neutral. It's like 99% Firefox, because if you run a Firefox build, you can, we have like a built-in button to say report site issue, and it'll take a screenshot. So we've got a really easy funnel of broken websites into this web page, but it's not, you know, there's bugs in there for Chrome and for Edge and other things. And so we started to really widen our net, right? Before we were only looking at Bugzilla issues, and has anyone here ever filed a bug in Bugzilla? It's like, you're still traumatized, right? You're like, I kid, it's lovely. Every bug system is terrible. But it's, you know, it's hostile to users. And so we wanted to just kind of like make a nicer version of that. And then anyways. So here's how we get bugs. So we get a lot of reports from webcompat.com, not more than we can handle. I think that's fair to say, Adam, would you agree? Well, depends on how you define more than we can handle. We can triage every single bug. There's a backlog of like things, you know, at a certain level, you have to like dig in and read minified Angular code, and like you can only do that for so many hours a day. We also get bug reports from Bugzilla. There's some organic, just like hardcore Mozilla community users who will say like, this web page is broken, or the majority there is like things will get funneled to us through like DOM components, etc. And then we've also got this site outreach component that's not really, I guess, it's like the bottom of the funnel. I don't know. This was 5 a.m. when I made this. So what I wanted to mention there is like part of what we do, we're interested in interop and compat, like why things are broken. We want to know, does Gecko have a bug? If so, like how important is this? We want to get fixed, obviously, prioritize that against other stuff. But we also want to know, like, does this website have a bug? Is it something that we can easily ask them to update and fix? And so sometimes we do that, and sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're not. That's like the hardest thing in the universe, is asking someone to update a website.
Do you have a rough idea of how often? I was looking through the database last night, and like my experience has been, I'm really cynical on this. I've had a very low success rate on the site image. Like, would you say 10%, 50%, 80%?
Adam, do you have a gut feeling?
Honestly, it could be half and half. It really depends on
how often it's successful.
Yeah,
It's
not easy.
But you do get a lot of responses.
Yeah, we do get a lot of stuff.
It takes a special kind of person. So like Adam and Carl are amazing. I don't want to embarrass you, but it takes like someone who, like, I don't know, like people have the tendency, you want to like shame a website to doing the right thing, and that's like delete, right? That doesn't work. Also finding the right, you turn into a stalker, you learn the right tricks. One of the best tricks we did on accident was webcompat.com is, let's see if we go to all issues. This is really just, I push a special keyboard shortcut. It's just a front end to GitHub issues. And so GitHub is this magical ecosystem where you can just like mention anyone and you end up in their inbox. And so people like are part of orgs. And so it's really easy to find people and get their attention. And so way more successful through GitHub than like random tweets, for example.
Or, so a good example where we weren't successful, Metrolinx. So the Go Transit site is broken in Firefox Mobile. I think I noticed it the first day I started back on Mozilla, filed the bug, and that was like almost 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've tried numerous times communicating with them. I've called like executive assistants who are like, I'll get someone to call you today. And then, it's still broken.
Adam's like one of the only people who will actually get on the phone and try to talk to a human to fix a website.
Can you imagine?
Pressure on this, right?
Yeah.
I don't have the same success on GitHub. I find
Really?
we get a lot of broken libraries that are orphaned, and the author or the committer doesn't actually care about any issues in that repository anymore.
That's an issue. Like if you're looking at a library and it's just like toast.
Yeah. Right, like we're trying to ship the scroll top for Chrome.
Yeah.
And there's one, and it's used, but file an issue and no response. Right,
Yeah.
it's relatively easy to fix. Like it's one line fix, but
If it's
the library's not
maybe it
updated.
would be worth adding a comment to that repository and saying we forked this. It's not actively maintained, but there are bug fixes in our fork.
Yeah,
I just need some basic site outreach to get momentum.
The problem though, like, so libraries are a special kind of hell because you can get the library updated, but it's like, surprise, it was deployed to 10 billion websites that are never changing.
Right, I find I get more response outreaching to businesses than people who've written some code in their hobby.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. So that's, like we've been up until now very reactive in our handling of compat issues, and so we're trying to shift that momentum forward to be more proactive, like to understand. I'll mention that in a second. I think I actually didn't make a slide, but you're going to remind me to talk about this. Thanks, Dennis. So this is a crazy screenshot. I think I have the actual app running in Nightly, but I won't bother switching display stuff here. But so Eric and our team in Taipei, he wanted to understand like what are the interdependencies of WebCompat bugs, WebCompat.com bugs to Bugzilla issues, and like what are the these clusters? And this is we're trying to understand like how can we visualize what's important, right? Like right now, like I'm saying, it's very much like a gut feeling. It's like, oh yeah, that sounds familiar. And so he did this work, and it's really interesting using D3. And so this is just one of these clusters. You can see like all these dupes, all these like broken in similar ways, maybe not 100% the same way, but they all more or less go back to bug 941351, which is, I don't think I linked it, but that is, I think it's support M3U8 source for video, right? Which is Apple HLS stuff. So we now have a native HLS implementation using the Android like system stuff, like the codecs that ship with it. And that's writing the trains as of 56 maybe. So this is like, we have more dupes than this. There's probably 200 sites we know of, lots of really popular naked people sites use that technology. So that's like an important way, like we had to do this kind of work to convince lawyers and media people, like this is important, like people want to see video, and if it's not working in your browser, like you're going to the next browser, and that happens enough times, it's like, why did I open Firefox ever? Like Chrome mobile is awesome. And it is, and I don't say that sarcastically, it's great. So this is the type of work we're trying to have a better grip on, like to understand like what are trending issues, like can we get ahead of this before it turns into like 200, like this giant bubble, right? So that's, this is a slide I thought I didn't write. Turns out I wrote it, thanks for the reminder, Dennis. So some other projects that we're working on. So Dennis and Eric are working on this, what we're calling WebCompat Go Faster. Go Faster is just a keyword for a type of add-on in Firefox. Does anyone remember Opera Browser.js? Yeah. Does anyone not know what that is? You can raise your hand. So it's a magic JavaScript file that ships, I think it still does, they still make a browser, ships in the browser, and it has like Chrome privilege access, and so it can totally just like hack your web page. And it's really interesting, but it's also, it's like a double-edged sword, right? Like you don't want to, you're able to use it to fix anything you want, but you don't want to have to maintain that thing forever. And so we decided to build a version of it, because at the time everyone on our team worked at Opera, so naturally we're like, yeah, let's do that again. But the reason being, so there was a version, I think 43 or 44 we released, where there was a YouTube bug. YouTube just had a UA parsing thing where it was like, I think we supported WebM over, I don't know, whatever, media stuff. There was some bug. And so we shipped a new version. YouTube doesn't work for everybody. And you know, we have relationships with YouTube, but they can't fix that overnight, right? Like they have their own priorities, and it's like, okay, this is important, but we're in the middle of something. And so we ended up doing a Kim spill. And so we just did a dot release where we wrote some code and said, if YouTube, pretend you're version 43, right? And that solved the problem. But like, if you have to Kim spill and write C++ code to fix a broken website, like that's bad, in my opinion. And so this gives us the ability to tweak that JS, right? Like we do the same process, but we can ship it to all our users within 24 hours, right? Like an async update, and it's just like a little add-on, basically. Then begin the process of like, hey, YouTube, we just shipped this thing. Like, let's fix this bug. No pressure. You know, we can ship this for a month. And anyway, so that's one of our tools we're building. Adam, sorry, Dennis, just landed some code around that today.
Last night,
effectively.
How much code existed in the Opera one?
So it's surprisingly not as big as you would think. I think it's like 1,000 lines of JS, right? But they had, if you can go look at it, it's on GitHub today.
You and Philip sharing that with me, by the way, is one of the reasons. Like we're totally blind to that world in the Chrome team, right? We've never done anything like that in Chrome as far as
yeah.
I mean, well, except for the one Dave just shipped. We won't talk about that. No, it's the right thing to do, totally. But you know, seeing that helped open my eyes to how big this problem really is. You know, like an Opera worked really hard to avoid ever using that, as far as I can tell. But there's still 1,000 lines. And their URL is this, change behavior in this way.
Or one of the biggest kind of thorns in their side was like these DHTML menu libraries, right? You remember back in the day to have like a cool drop-down menu like that required a library to do. And it was all browser sniffing, so it was very much like this the interop bug you're talking about. What's the name? What's the
Scroll
code
top.
name? Scroll top interop. There you go. So where it's like you're looking for a class in the document, and if so, change this variable to that. Or that's not entirely what
We
you're
talk
doing.
about predictability for web developers. Think how insane that would make a web developer when they like test everything on their staging server. It looks great, and then they deploy to the wild, and the browser behaves slightly differently because the URL is now different. You know, like.
Yeah, it's kind of a nightmare, but it's like one where it saves us other kinds of nightmares. And so this is something like we never want to use this, but we have the ability, and as soon as we write code for this, like it has to go, it has to get out of the browser. Tom's also working on something, we don't have a code name for it yet. That's Tom's Q3 OKR's code name. We want to have like a top website regression suite, right? For layout, for other stuff. It's a really hard problem to solve because you can't test the live web because it changes too much. Like there's ads, A/B tests. So this is like a non-trivial problem, with the idea being like create some version of a website and be able to like have like, you know, you're doing diffing, right? Master copy, golden copy, whatever the terminology there is. And so we can know like, okay, we're refactoring borders on tables. Oh shit, we just broke BurgerKing.com, right? Something like that is what we want. And so we can back that code out before it lands. So that's something Tom's working on. We're also planning towards the end of the year to have a closer collaboration with like David Byrne's team, the web platform test folks. I don't even know what their team is called. Does anyone know?
Rendering?
Is it?
Yeah.
Rendering?
I think it's,
He told me he was trying to create a, well, I don't know what he's.
I think, no, he wants to create like something like what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like a cross-functional predictability.
Yeah.
I forget what they're
Yeah,
called
which is cool.
internally
Yeah,
right now.
yeah, I was like, oh, that's great.
Yeah, predictability is showing up in a lot of places.
Yeah.
But we want to work with them, so we're like, this is more of the proactive work, right? Like, let's fix the bugs today that will prevent bugs from being deployed to sites in 5 years, 2 years, 6 months.
It'd be cool if that could be shared, this regression test suite too.
Yeah.
document. More than happy to remember your stuff.
Tom's building that on top of web extensions, so in theory that could work in other web browsers.
Yeah, just one API.
So-
That is it's not a Firefox users.
And then better tooling around, this is similar to this, that graphic I showed you, like what is the scale and scope of these issues, right? Like this site breaks YouTube, that's really bad. This site breaks like grandpa's fishing store.com. That's potentially also really bad. We don't know, like maybe that one little bug. So I don't know. We're trying to figure that out. So another thing, kind of shifting gears, like these are some of our current pain points, like some of the most important things to us now. Like a few years ago, it was like WebKit, CSS, and a few APIs. That's said and done, and that's fixed a billion websites. WebKit appearance is still like a huge pain in the butt on mobile. It's obviously not spec'd, and it's probably something we need to sit down and spec. We're trying to implement that in Gecko. There's been attempts that have been backed out, and there's work in progress. The CSS working group just talked about this last week. I didn't really follow that conversation at all. I think they basically decided an unprefixed appearance ain't never gonna happen. Meta viewport interop is surprisingly a big issue for us. I think Chrome has like a really interesting way. Are we looking for someone who knows about meta viewport? Yeah.
Yeah, opens over there.
Oh, there it is.
Chrome does really smart stuff. Like maybe you guys do like a multi-pass, like constraint process. So I don't know.
To do what?
To do just like meta viewport, like the meta viewport.
Figure out how big it should be.
Right.
It depends on how far you consume that.
Yeah.
So if you have like overflowing elements that are wider than your page, we'll make it bigger so
Yeah.
you can zoom all the way out.
Yeah.
A bigger thing, if Chrome has behavior on meta viewport that isn't in the current spec, like pseudo spec
Yeah.
we have, right? That's a bug for Dave.
Yeah. So there's issues there that we need to, like, there is no real meta viewport spec. Like,
It's a device adaptation.
it's device
spec,
adaptation, right? But
That
it's,
kind of tries to just capture what the browser is doing in
Right.
a common case.
It doesn't try to handle the edge cases.
I think there's like a blurb on how viewport meta works. It's the
Yeah,
my
that is-
adaptation is like at viewport CSS rules. So that's all.
Yeah, but it has this whole section that describes how you map
How you map
meta
it, yeah.
onto the
But I think-
adaptation.
I think there are some edge cases.
Yeah. So that's an issue that we could talk about in the future now or whatever. There's this really dumb input padding interrupt bug that we have. Let me see if I can get a good screenshot of that. It's let's see, let's pick a random bug. Like text gets cut off. This is something that's not, I don't think it's specified by any spec, and we're just doing something wrong. And so we kind of like clip right here, the input padding. That's a weird issue if anyone's really into input padding. You want to dig into that. WebRTC is not it's not all over the web, but it's used in some really important websites, and there's some quirks there: Hangouts, Skype, Slack, video. Is that right? Slack video.
Yeah, we're not supporting.
WebKit line clamp. Does anyone know what that is?
Yeah.
It's
I was looking at Spike the other day. You have one of these.
there's
We've talked about this
okay.
as well, and search about the line clamp stuff.
Is there a spec?
I
Okay.
think there's.
No, I think we have to write it because we probably need to implement this because it's used frequently enough that we need it. Window.event. This is in progress. The spec work there. I just need to finish up some web platform tests. And then there's like occasionally just like weird, Flexbox edge cases. This one's famous, but there was actually an update to this last night. So this is flex items treat percentage padding and margin values in vertical axis as 0 if the flex container lacks an explicit type. Obviously, right? And so this is one of those areas where the Flexbox specs is like, do what Chrome does or do what Firefox does. And those are both valid. And it breaks web pages, but last night, that was yesterday, right? Dee Holbert, who's one of our layout engineers, like wrote patches to just match link behavior, which I'm actually totally down with because it makes web pages less broken. So I don't have to complain about this thing anymore since that changed. So that's kind of hopefully an idea of like where we've come from, what we're interested in, what we would like to do. Obviously, like really excited about this collaboration, just working together in general. Rick, you mentioned, there's only one editor to the compat spec, and he's like a lazy editor.
No, like you've taken pull requests from me. I just mean, like when you say, "Oh, we got to specify WebKit appearance," that sounds like it's a bug that you feel that you should be specifying, right? Like I was searching for that one. Oh no, I was searching for WebKit line clamp. We had a Chromium bug in October 2013 to remove it. Our usage said it's 0.01% of web pages, but people eventually decided they couldn't remove it and resolved it won't fix. To me, that was a mistake. We should have retitled it, standardized it, and assigned it to someone on the team to write spec for it.
Yeah. We have what, like 20 people in here? We can have 20 co-authors by the end of the day. So there's no like, there's no ownership issues there. But yeah, we're excited about collaboration and just like figuring out stuff together. So are there any questions or?
One thing I'll say is it's disturbing to me, if you go back to that list that you had, it's disturbing to me that I didn't know, other than like I know WebRTC is an issue. Where's this? I don't think I know. I mean, I've talked a bunch about meta viewport. I didn't know it was that big of a pain point. Like most of these I didn't know were a big pain point, and that's the problem, right? That's what we need to solve with this. Not that I need to know about everything myself personally, but I'm positive we're having communication gaps here between Mozilla and Google.
Yeah, I think it's partially us not being good at communicating, not even with Google, but there's probably people at Mozilla who are like, oh, like right now, like, I mean, it's not a secret. So we're really focused on shipping Quantum, right? This project that we blogged about, and it's like, we want to make the browser faster, and we want to do cool stuff. And so like people are really focused on performance right now, which is the right thing to do. And so some of this interop work is kind of taking the back burner until we ship that release, right? And And so we've been a little quiet. We're just like collecting bugs and trying to understand things, waiting for the moment to be like, fix these things. But yeah.
And also we do quantum, we're much more data driven and upfront when it's like what are the metrics we actually want to improve and actually shipping experiments and all that. So for WebCompat in the future, we also want to get better at metrics, which we saw on your slides as well. So what are the things we can measure ourselves against that we actually improve the thing for the user? And not just like we fix a platform test, but how does it trickle down to user as an experience improvement?
Yeah. Yeah, Harold, what did you tell me in San Francisco? You said your metrics game is weak.
Yeah.
And he's right. So we're gonna work together to make it stronger. Yeah.
I'm just curious, like, kind of how it feels like a lot of these compat issues are mainly related to the mobile browsers. Like, I mean, do you have a sense of how big a problem is this in mobile versus the desktop browsers?
So like just looking at this list, I guess the first 2 are mobile specific, and that's it. It used to be like, so that was, I think we were skewed towards mobile because that's what our team was spun up to solve those problems. And you know, as I mentioned, like, you know, market share is what, that's one of these operating forces in the elastic band, right? So for a long time, Firefox, everybody was testing in Firefox or they were developing in Firefox, and I think that's one of the main reasons why there aren't so many super drastic interop issues on desktop, right? Like there's always going to be, you know, browser A implements this feature before browser B, and so sites want to use that, and things kind of break. It's like a catch-up phase. But
Desktop has more engine diversity too, right? Like vast amount of usage on mobile has this WebKit monoculture problem, right?
Yeah.
There's multiple engines, but they meant a lot of usage has WebKit ancestry.
Yeah. Trying to think, maybe Dennis or Tom can chime in if there's any areas around desktop that speak out to you more.
Probably new stuff like service booker, SpeakQuest outlet callback, how people use SpeakQuest animation frame and timers, like how do you event queues under specified, where like prioritization is different, prioritization changes when your background, interventions, working event against your event queue. Like YouTube hit that when they refactored. Just their expectation of the request outlet callback, there's things under spec, if it should fire or which qualities you get.
These are really tricky because, I mean, they're just hard problems in general, right? Like time, like no one understands time. And so these other problems are easier understood. I think we're just now getting into this new area where it's like you solve all the big problems, the big ugly problems, and then you have to like really dig through the cracks to find like things obviously are breaking, like but like how and in what weird ways.
The more interesting ways we've been finding out with quantum, because I've been trying to keep my nose in as deep as I can, is performance is actually much more of a WebCompat concern than people think it is. We think, well, Blink is fast, other people will catch up. It's not a problem, you know? And it's not just pervasive in the web dev community, but just in how people think when they're writing browsers. I found in Mozilla. So now that we know, you know, Facebook's group page doesn't load as quickly in Firefox, we're delving into figuring out why. We don't really see any obvious reasons, and it's difficult to figure out. Maybe it's just Chrome caches something a little differently as it's creating nodes, who knows? But it's a very difficult interop bug to fix because we're rendering the site 5 seconds slower or whatever in some cases, and we don't know why.
I've got to admit, I've punted a little bit on performance when we talk about predictability. And performance is really important, and predictable performance is really important, but it's such a huge problem in its own right that I've said that's a problem for our performance team.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what we had to do as well as I could tell. I mean, again, I'm on the fringe of Mozilla, and the WebCompat team is trying to work its way to becoming as core as we think it should be. But when you actually look at these issues and what we're trying to do to solve them, we might be able to solve them just fine by using all these new Rust components from Servo or whatever, but it's hard to tell right now.
One thing that reminds me of, and related to your question, like we've had a hard time like, I think we all have different ideas of what compat and interop mean. Certainly the people in this room probably have one understanding, but like if you talk to, someone in marketing, or you talk to your neighbor, they're like, oh, the website doesn't work. I had to open another browser. And really trying to understand what that means is difficult. Sometimes it means like there was scroll jank. Like people interpret scroll jank is like, this website is broken, when like, you're like, nah, it's just, it's just jank, it's all right. Or they have like an ad blocker, and that's, there's some, like the code was written in such a way that when they click submit on the form, right, we're blocking that GA event, and so the form doesn't submit. You go to your secondary browser that's not as privacy sensitive, it's like, it works. This browser sucks. Like these, we've tried to scope our problem to like, that's out of scope. Like I can't solve that problem for you, but it's still a problem. And so it's worth at least mentioning or thinking about, like, performance, privacy, ad blockers, these types of things fall into the bucket of what feels like compat or interop, that are.
Is there a willingness to conform to those other things between the Chrome and Firefox teams? Like performance characteristics, performance heuristics?
I mean, well, some of there is a desire, like we want to, I think it's good for the web that we compete on performance, right? Ask the servo folks. Like we've had a bunch of debates with them about some things we're trying to do about, like, can't we just assume that like transforms and opacity are the things that can happen off the main thread? And they're like, no, you cannot bake that into any spec because we're going to beat you on like animating top and left, right? And that's good for the web. We want them to have a different, show how you can have a completely different engine. Think, for example, like if we tried to standardize on performance characteristics, would V8 have ever happened, right? Would like Ajax have like taken off the way it did, right? So I'd argue that competition there does more good than harm.
I do think though, like standardizing a way to test performance in certain features would be really useful. For instance, there's a lot of cost that we have sunk into some of these heavier features that have come about lately, like session storage, some of these storage mechanisms, and also service worker being another one, where we really have no idea what the performance is going to be on a lot of different platforms before we actually implement the feature. And then so when we get our numbers back, it's like, oh wow, this really increases the amount of time it takes to load the page. We can't ship this. This is way too slow for us. But now we've spent like 3 months developing this whole thing, and that's a lot of concern. So there can be sometimes pushback, especially from developers, of like, I don't want to do this until I know that it's performant on every platform.
The performance API that's coming up with time to first paint metrics and things like that is probably going to be very important for us to keep an eye on as WebCompat devotees, I guess I can call most of us here, because I know there are sites that are already trying to use it that actually have broken in Firefox. Once I think it was, who was it, Spotify? I think they were on their open source version or something along those lines. They were using measuring time to first paint, but the spec for performance API said, if you don't support a specific type of performance measurement, throw it. And they weren't try catching it. So suddenly their site wasn't working in Firefox at all. And they needed to just put a try catch block or remove that code because Blink didn't support it at the time. So again, these are the kinds of things that we're going to have to start really focusing on, I think, because sites are really interested in them.
Was kind of on that vein of performance, is it more that it would be really helpful to be able to test what the performance of a feature is before you call a certain API, or is it more like before you start implementing, you want somewhere to go to see, is this like
what are the expectations of the?
Yeah, I guess which one is it, like a runtime thing you'd like to check the performance of? Like, will this be composited, or is it
anything is better than what we have now? I would say like any extra bit of data that we can use to determine and prioritize features is really helpful. So like obviously if you had, for instance, on this platform, the classroom with these like RAM requirements and things like that, this is the performance of like a session storage where you're hitting the 5 megabyte limit or something like that. That would be obviously like, that's amazing. Like what? How do we, that's so good to know.
Do you, when you say performance, how do you distinguish between like speed and tolerance? Like how fast you can do something versus how much of it you can do? What are you looking for more?
I guess like just the like, so say you call a method, like what's your expectation of performance for that method given all these platforms and given these conditions of like the device, but also the browser that you're on? and not necessarily like the network connection, that's something completely different, but like say I'm making a call to the browser and that's anytime I'm not writing my own JavaScript or some library, like how long is that call going to take? And when is it going to return? Or like when is an event going to fire after I do this operation on the browser?
Sounds like we want a cross-platform set of tests like web platform tests that's run the same way, but it spits out performance data instead of
Exactly. So you could look it up in some, dashboard of like this is the performance bounds of different methods.
Sounds like someone could actually run the platform tests and just time how long the tests take and
I
call
know
out.
there's so much else happening in web platform tests between the actual interfaces and just I don't know that would be.
Yeah.
But there could be I am super interested in performance, and there's two types of performance, I think. When we talk about performance, like there's speed, like how long does it take? And then there's like tolerance, like how many times can I do this before the system crashes?
Or it starts to take.
Or it starts to take longer.
Too many open
like,
transactions and then just.
There's, and in Test 262, we have a lot of people who are running Test 262 for their JavaScript engines alongside a bunch of what are effectively tolerance tests. And there's been some conversation from different engine teams about creating a Test 262-stress or something. And performance and speed would also be like another step. And I think at WPT we could think about it.
I wonder whether telemetry is kind of the right tool for this, because I know that the V8 team has in recent years really learned that they're better served finding ways to identify things in the wild that will show them how JavaScript is being used, not how these micro benchmarks somehow become the gold standard for JavaScript.
Yeah, everyone hates micro benchmarks,
right? And so I can, from my own experience, I can tell you that, that if you just use this API in a test, that it's going to be so fast. And then when I happen to do this one other thing at the same time, its performance characteristics change entirely. So I'd much rather know what the top, however many sites or whatever sample we want to use, performs with these APIs were used and those APIs performed that way or something like that. I mean, it's a really hard problem, but I think it'll be hard to get out the information you really want without having something that's running against sort of real world JavaScript instead of just
if there was
APIs.
This is why your test suite I think is interesting. If there's a way for me to submit some slightly abstracted, maybe not totally reduced test cases of how the characteristics of my software as a Google search engineer or a CNN.com programmer, to be run in this way. I think that could also be
one practical I could tell you thing. Sorry for everyone else sometimes. One practical thing I've heard from a couple of developers that are interested in this, who I still manage to thankfully keep in touch with, is they want to be able to fundamentally run an A/B test and say through, say, the performance API, how much RAM difference is there between these two versions for users? What's the standard deviation spread? That kind of little stuff, which they can compute if we give them a good performance API. And their concern is we can get this data, but we need to know from users, are they willing to share it with us? Because this is fingerprint analysis, all that kind of privacy issues. So giving them the ability to A/B test is good enough for a lot of the big sites, I guess, based on what my friends are telling me. And just being mindful of the fact that every time we give these kinds of telemetry things out onto the web, we need users to be able to either really easily know that it's being done and opt out of it, or better, find a way to let them opt in somehow in general. So I think that those things would help web devs really quickly. You guys could probably do an A/B test and say, oh, the new YouTube version is using twice as much RAM in Edge. It's using, half the RAM in Chrome. What's going on? Let's investigate. And on top of that, you actually have some data, and you wouldn't have to wait for WebCompat people to figure that for you.
It feels like all the issues on the JavaScript side are becoming less and less because more APIs go asynchronous, and a few synchronous APIs are being heavily optimized so they don't do any I/O. Or that's happening. I think the scope now extends. Like there was a presentation on HP2 how sites switching to HP2 had issues being slower than HP1 just because there's differences between browsers and how everything is handled on a network, and then other stuff where CSS filters are being overused because it had tested in Chrome and it looks awesome, and it tested in Firefox and we hadn't accelerated yet, so it was slow. Just the breadth of from network to rendering CSS.
Thread contention.
Could be anywhere.
Variances. That's the kind of metrics that are going to be useful to give people, I think. So they'll be able to say, well, we switched to this async API, and that's probably the culprit for why the website suddenly is janky. They'd be able to find that kind of information out if they have a tool that says jank has increased, lowest janks, garbage collections have increased, little metrics that we could probably share, with privacy concerns, obviously, but.
All right, it's after 1. I suggest, yeah, I think we should I suggest we grab food and bring it here, and then after lunch we can do your talk.
Sure. I don't think my talk will take that long. It should be fairly straightforward.
I'm good, everyone? All right, let's head downstairs. I feel like maybe our performance was pretty optimistic.
Yes.